anyone from Chive, and I was like, oh my God, we're meeting John. Holy crap, we're meeting John. And he didn't know what to expect. And he's like crawling on the floor with my kids, which now does not surprise me. It was like, okay, somebody might get it, but like this community seems too good to be true. So from there, things just completely changed.
Absolutely. And your biggest need back then, can you kind of walk us through that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we really had asked just for the van because Griffin was really only safe sitting in his wheelchair, which didn't strap down to our car. That was our ask, was for a van. But then I believe it was John who asked about our home.
Yeah. Yep.
And was like,
we were originally just going to, me and my father-in-law and my brother, we're just gonna like tack on a bedroom off one end of the house, something that we could handle that wasn't gonna be crazy. And we had enough skills between us that we could probably swing it. And then, yeah, it was his idea about, well, why don't we do the flash campaign for that? It was like, oh, okay, yeah. That sounds cool.
Because at that point,
I had actually been to that home, and it, you know, thinking about raising triplets in that home, single story. I think the basement I didn't even go down into. It was a little dark and dingy. Clearly, Griffin wasn't going to be getting down there, and I think we just kind of looked at each other, and it was like, we got to do something about this. So at that point, did you guys know what a flash charity campaign was?
We had heard of it. Well, mostly we'd heard of Taylor's.
Yeah, Taylor's was the only one that I was familiar with. So yeah, it wasn't a thing to us anyway at that point. We had just seen, okay, this one happened and it was insane. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. And so fast forward, we do a little bit more, you know, getting some information from you guys, getting some pictures. You know, we launched the flash campaign. Can you kind of take us through what that day was like for you guys?
Oh God, it was crazy. Like we knew it was going to be some point that day. We kind of kept checking everything.
John kept kind of calling and texting us saying, hey, this is the timeline, get ready.
And then when it went up, I was like, oh my God, this is real. Like it's actually happening, but I don't think it really sunk in for quite some time. But we were talking earlier about like what that really meant. And it wasn't really, I mean, of course, the financial impact on Griffin and all of our lives was significant in how he was able to live. But like just the lack of isolation was like the biggest change because like people were like, hey, you know, we're similar to you, let's reach out, or you know, we can offer help, let's reach out, or you know, it's so great to hear your story. And it was, you felt so much less alone than we ever had before, and that was worth millions of dollars to us.
And I love that you mentioned that the community, and you guys were instantly thrust into the community. And I know that there were people that were volunteering and kind of becoming a part of your lives. And it's just, you know, what the Chive community does. Can you kind of speak a little bit about like just how you guys got integrated and, you know, not only from the Flash Charity campaign, but kind of moving forward for the next few years, like how did that kind of evolve with you guys in the community?
We went to the Chive Gala that year.
Right.
We made friends that we know still. I mean, we met this girl named Jen Hullab. I don't know. Don't know her at all. And you know, we were able to help out. We met another a Michigan chapter recipient who is similar to Griffin in a lot of ways, who lives about a mile away.
Right.
We're friends with his family. I knew of the Gibsons for a while. We've never actually met, but I've known of them and their family for quite some time. I have many friends who we met through the chive and the berry, if any of you are around long enough to know that, that have really just been part of our lives and have been just kind of that support system that was missing, not from lack of, I think, people being willing, but maybe we were afraid to ask.
Well, and it was a thing like, you Google what Griffin has and you can get a definition, and that's about where it ends. There's no groups, there's no doctors, there's no help, there's no information. It's just, hey, that equals this, and that's it. So like Chrissy was saying, the isolation, wasn't anyone's fault. It's just, like, if he had cancer, then, there's tons of groups, there's tons of information. You can start feeling less alone, but there was nothing for what he had with his genetic disorder. It, like she said, it took 3 rounds of testing just to even put a name to it. So, and like to bring it full circle, like what you were asking, we were even involved with the Michigan chapter at a poker tournament about a month or 2 ago. We had high hopes of crushing that and got blown out pretty quick. It's not good. But
yeah. Like Griffin's, just all his needs they're pretty time consuming. So like just our lives were just, isolating just from a survival standpoint. So, there wasn't like a lot of time for like, it wasn't like a girls' weekend. There wasn't that kind of stuff. So when there was an opportunity for like a community saying, hey, we're here to help, whether you want us or not, that was a huge relief that I don't even know if we needed. We knew how much we needed it.
yeah, really.
Yeah, and fast forward, Griffin is living his best life. Obviously, there's ups and downs. Ultimately, he had some medical things that came up. You guys were in the hospital, and then, I remember, I think Heston maybe you emailed, or maybe it was a text message or something that I saw that Griffin had in fact passed away. Was it last May? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, and that just for me, it's just an unfortunate part. Like, we have now lost, I want to say, close to a couple dozen recipients, and for a while there, we hadn't lost any, and so it was like you almost felt invincible, and you're riding high, and it's like, what, we're bringing hope, and we're giving people a better quality of life, but in that they're living longer than they, we hear it time and time again with a lot of our recipients. The doctors don't even give them a chance to make it to 1. And then they're like, they're not going to make it to 5. And then they're not going to make it to 15 or whatever it is. I think Griffin especially hit me hard because he was one of those first ones that just like stole my heart, had just an amazing laugh. And not only that, but I think there are people on this call and a lot of people that are still donors to this day. I think I told you, Heston, that started following Chive Charities because of Griffin.
Well, you brought up the word legacy, and when you emailed me, which was pretty within days after us kind of telling everyone that he had passed, and you told us about how you were doing 1 recipient every 3 months, and after his story, that changed to more 1 a month or even more, and that was an amazing email to read, especially at that time, to know. I hadn't even thought about what legacy he might have, and that was awesome.
Yeah, and I wanted to let you know, because I don't think I ever shared that information, but Griffin really did pave the way. I think it was something like 300 to 400 monthly subscription. Like, people were moved to the point of donating to Chive Charities, and that is huge. Like you said, before that, we were helping somebody once every 3 to 4 months. Angie Cohn at the time, Angie Burke, who's now married and is now since left Chive Charities, but she's on the board. Something amazing about that story is she met her future husband, who was at that time the defensive linebacker coach for the Lions. Now he's with the Philadelphia Eagles. But, you know, that was one of those stories where it was like, wow. And I think to this day, it's one of the biggest movers of people, of active donors that allow us to do what we're doing today. And it brought so many people on that told their friends, and it's that ripple effect. So I think about Griffin's legacy, and I think it's still going, to be honest. And I see the things that you guys have done since, his passing, making sure that the equipment that he had goes to a great place, the vehicle goes to a family in need, just as much as you guys had. And, I think people are still inspired not only by Griffin, but then also by what you guys are doing, and just your positivity and your outlook. And I know it's hard to think back on that day, but man, I think Griffin's going to live on for forever in Chive Charities lore. But, and then that leads us to, Janet and Matt and Wesley, who we also have on this call.
And I have to get a battery charger.
All right. So Matt, we can start with you. I know Janet at, I think it was back in maybe 2015, started she started the actual Chive Charities application. And for whatever reason, I don't think she ended up finishing that application back then. Can you kind of talk us through your introduction to the Chive and Chive Charities, and kind of what was the impetus behind filling out that application?
Oh, I mute myself so you can actually hear me. How about that? Yeah, my introduction was actually through Janet, because when she started that, I was actually deployed. So I was, halfway around the world, and I guess she was looking at something to do and trying to do everything for Wesley. So she actually started all that. She told me when I called in, because I called her every day, and I called her and she was telling me what was going on, and I'm like, didn't you ever heard of the Chive? And I'm like, what's the Chive? What are you talking about? What are you doing now? And she goes, oh, don't worry about it. It's going to work out in the end. I'm like, okay, whatever. So, and then when I finally got home from that deployment, she told me what she was doing. And I was like, well, hopefully we can do this, And I think she started at the same time she started when she applied for the adapted bike for Wesley, the buddy bike. And and she spent all of her time on the buddy bike at that time back in 15.
Yeah, and I think she originally started that application with the idea of if we don't get it through this source, maybe Chive Charities can come in and help us with this bike.
Right.
Which I believe she said something about how you didn't end up getting that bike, but she helped raise money for other people to get that bike. And she just didn't feel right kind of getting a bike, because she's always been the one to kind of give and volunteer her time and effort to fundraise for others.
Right. Yeah. That's all we ever do in our town is raise money for other people. And for us, it was a hard pill to swallow to accept anything, because we know there's people out there that deserve it as well as we do. But our mindset is helping other people and not ourselves. So.
Yeah. And looks like we got you back, Janet. So we were just talking about filling out that initial application for Chive Charities. I did want to take it back, though. Obviously, you guys already had one son, and then, Wesley comes into the mix. And at what point were you guys clued into the fact that there was, something maybe a little bit different about Wesley?
So, medical-wise was about when I was 20 weeks. I was about 20 weeks pregnant, and up until then, everything seemed to go okay. We were living in a new area, not around friends or doctors we knew. I had already had troubles getting pregnant and miscarrying before, so I was always with a doctor that knew me really well. And I got to my 20-week appointment, and the doctor didn't give me an ultrasound like most everyone gets at 20 weeks. And I was like, wait, don't I get an ultrasound? Like, isn't this where I find out the sex of the baby and this and that? And they're like, and the doctor was really old school, and he said, you don't need one of those, only if there's something wrong with the baby. And I was like, how do you know there's something wrong with the baby if you don't give an ultrasound? So I immediately went to my husband's work just bawling, and all the girls are like, at his work, were like, no, you're gonna go to a local girl who's a OBGYN. And I said, oh, thank you. So I went there like the next day, and it was right around 20 weeks. She immediately it was Labor Day weekend, I remember that. She did an ultrasound, and they called back like on the Thursday or whatever before Labor Day weekend, and they said, yeah, there's a cyst. You're gonna have to go to a specialist. But of course, nobody can talk to you. I'm just relaying the message to you. You're gonna have to wait until Tuesday of next week, which was like, oh, great. So I called my husband, and I was like, yeah, there's like a cyst. And he's like, what do you mean a cyst? I said, I don't know. I think maybe I have a cyst. I don't know. And I was like in shock. So I call him back. I said, where's the cyst? Like, is it from me having cysts? And they're like, no, it's in the baby's brain. Oh, okay, and I was just total shock. Called my husband back. I'm like, it's in the baby's brain. And he's like, is it a tumor? Is it cancer? Is it what? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how to ask questions. I don't know. So we immediately got the call that we needed to go to a specialist down in Lansing. So we went to the specialist, and that's when they started telling us about the brain issues, that he was missing part of his brain. And the team was really good, but we started doing ultrasound after ultrasound after ultrasound and blood work to see what was going on, because like every week we'd go there, and it's kind of like the Steins were saying, we'd go there one week and they would say, well, we think there could be holes in the baby's heart, but they might clear up before he's born. And then we'd go there the next week, and they'd say, he's not swallowing right, so he might be born and die immediately, can't eat or drink. And we'd go there the next week, and they would say, he's got small ears, we don't know why, maybe he can't hear. We'd go there the next week, and they would say something, well, we think he has a problem with his stomach. And we had a blood draw. I had a blood draw, or amnio. I had an amnio to rule out any genetic things that they could think of. And we had a lot of ultrasounds at that point with a lot of different texts that kept telling us, he's a boy, we see the penis, he's a boy. And I got the call for the lab work from the amnio, and they said, looking for like Down syndrome and extra chromosomes. And she's like, nope, it's a regular 46XX. So she's good. And I'm like, she's good? Like, what? I think and she was like, wait a minute, I did think you said you were having a boy, right? And I said, like, oh, for sure. Okay.
Yep, those are our dogs.
Yeah. It's like, I know they said Jen's dogs.
Yeah, so it seems like you guys had so many things that you guys were dealing with, and at some point, Janet, didn't they tell you that, I don't know if you got a diagnosis at that time,
no,
but
we had 100 different syndromes that things could possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
We did a lot more blood work trying to figure out, like, did they actually take my blood? Why was it showing that? So we just didn't know. At one point, they were having my husband maybe look at funeral arrangements that he wasn't going to make it. And so we had planned, they talked a lot about his head and extra fluid, so we had a planned C-section. And
well, before we get to that, like the one thing that I love is through all of this, they're telling you, you know, there's a good chance he's not going to make it. And there was no doubt in your mind, like, hey, you know what, like, there's this ultrasound. And I think that's one of the things that stuck with me that's actually up on the screen here, that Wesley's just like giving a thumbs up, like, hey, you know what, guys, I got this. You know, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
That's how I've always looked at that ultrasound, with this thumbs up. Yeah, like we had a doctor that was good right away, and he said we were already past the legal limit to have an abortion in Michigan, but he would do the work for us to get us somewhere else if we needed that option. And we just looked at each other and we were like, no, that, not even gonna consider that. Wouldn't consider early. We didn't want to consider it we were just at 25, 26 weeks, whatever it was, right after like what the legal limit was. And yeah, there was for us, there was no, we weren't going to have it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know. So we had the scheduled C-section, and it wasn't until that he was born, and we realized he had like a cyst in one of his eye sockets. And that's when they were like, oh, obviously there is something going on here. They checked the other eye socket and realized he didn't have anything in there. So he started on surgery right away. He had a great team. There were people there from all over in his little NICU room. They loved him because he was healthy as could be. None of the problems that they thought he was going to have. He does have the missing part of the brain, but health-wise, he was breathing on his own and eating on his own. And in the NICU, where the babies usually are just in their little, you know, bassinets and stuff and warmers, he was one of the ones that could come out. So anytime I did get to the NICU, for the short time he was there, he was in someone's arms being played with, because they never get to play with babies, as they put it. So yeah, so we didn't know until he was born about that issue. Yeah.
And so the first 2-3 years of his life, he was, you know, relatively normal, right? Like I mean, obviously there were some delays. And
yeah,
but, you know, you could probably attribute some of that to also not being able to experience with all of his senses. But he did things like start to get some vocabulary, didn't he? He was singing and stuff like that. Like, what was his personality, you know, those first 2-3 years?
Like the picture on the screen, he was just always playing, always happy. He was delayed in a lot. He has pituitary issues, so he is smaller than most kids. So he stayed small for a long time, but he did what they like referred to as parrot talking and stuff. He would just, any song that came on the radio, he doesn't even want me to, he doesn't like me to even say that. He doesn't like me telling his stories. I won't make you. He used to sing nonstop. Like any song that came on the radio, he sang along to it. He loved to sing. We thought he was delayed in talking, but he was making it up. He was seeing speech therapists.
He doesn't like.
He's using his talking device to say he doesn't like something. And so he was talking, never in full sentences, never a back and forth kind of conversation, but his voice was there, and he was able to talk and sing a whole entire song from memory. He just memorized everything. And
Come in, Wesley. We love it.
He's trying to plug his ears so he doesn't hear. So he was always at the ISD, and he didn't go to public schools because he was delayed in other areas. And it wasn't until he was like 6 that all of a sudden we're like, I'm like, honey, I don't think he's talking. And I don't know how we just kept rolling with it, and he just eventually had stopped talking and stopped singing, and we hadn't noticed it because it was so like gradual.
Mhm.
And then it's like, yep, he's not talking. And so we went to the teachers and the doctors and stuff again, and they were like, oh, that's probably because he's starting to walk now finally, and he's got to focus his energy all on walking. Or if you're potty training him or trying, like, he's focusing on that. So sometimes kids give up talking. But then it was like later on, we started realizing that those were all like signs of autism, and that kids can have like a parrot talk or mirror image talking, and then it kind of just goes away.
Got it. And so I think it was selective mutism. Is that?
Yeah, that's what they call it, is so because he can verbally talk. He's not necessarily been tested. He hasn't had an MRI in a long time, but his speech therapist says it looks a lot like people who have like that vocabulary stroke, and it's just too hard. The information's all in his head. It's just too hard for him to form that sentence. So
Right.
it's just difficult. So his language is all very simple. If he wants water, he just says, Mom, water, potty, go night. Like he doesn't like to use sentences. So we've been working really hard on trying, but if you watch him, you can tell like it's very hard for him to get information to come out of his lips. And he gets very frustrated because he has information in there that needs to come out.
I think that's the other thing that kind of stuck with me is that one, even though he's got all these physical, obviously like having no eyes, like the stuff that he still loves to do that he's always done, like skiing, for example, like that's incredible. Swimming, walking, when I believe they said he may not walk, and, he's sitting there walking. And then, he's essentially trapped. He's got all of these, you guys know that he has these thoughts going through his head and he can't get those out. At what point did somebody on kind of his medical team or at school, at what time did they say, hey, you know what, like there's this device that may be able to like help him speak his mind?
Yeah, so we had moved back up here when, like where we live now, when Wesley was 1. He was in a great system where he was born. But we moved back home. My husband was in the military, lots of deployments. That's another thing they kept saying, maybe he's not talking because his dad's gone for a year, maybe he just is having issues. So everyone kept putting it off. And I go to all these meetings and get-togethers with all these other visually impaired kids, and they're running around, they're on their cell phones, they're playing and talking, and unless you see their white cane or their service dog, you wouldn't even know that they were visually impaired or blind. And my son's like sitting here next to me, and I'm like, well, and I was like, something, he needs something more. All these kids have fancy, he has a brailler, and it is a typewriter that weighs 100 pounds for him to type Braille. And he eventually got what they call a smart brailler. They haven't redid braillers in forever. So he got a smart brailler that talks back to him. And I was noticing he just loved hearing the words. Every day I would give him every time I passed him, I'd just give him a new word to spell. And he just loves learning how to spell new words. So I had went to his IEP meeting, which is a meeting that you have every year with the school to set your child's goals. And I was telling them, like, every time I go to all these things, all these kids have iPhones and iPads, and they're doing all this fancy stuff and he has like no electronics. But he was also, they have him in a class with severe cognitive delayed people of all, up to 26 years of age. And I've never seen him really doing anything in his class. Our school district is really bad. I won't get into that, but he's doing nothing in his class. Every time I go there, he's dancing or watching a movie. He's in a class with kids that just aren't learning, and they didn't have a curriculum. And I said, he needs a curriculum. He needs something. He needs to be learning something. I said, do you guys even know he knows multiplication and addition? And they're like, no, we didn't know that. I said, oh, so I was like, well, I would like to get him more into electronics. I know things are available. If you fight with a ISD or a school to get your child devices that they need, is really hard. They do not want to spend the price that things cost that are adaptive. So it's a struggle. And we went to the IEP meeting and I asked, like, what things can we be using? And that's when the tech team that was at the meeting said, oh, we have another kid that uses this talking device. We think Wesley would like it. So it was available there. I don't know how long. They never brought it up until I was starting to ask for things. And that's when they're like, we're gonna see if we can get one lent to us. Of course, it's a little different because Wesley is visually impaired and the other kids using it, I don't think were. So they needed the special key guard that goes over it. And so they got it and they said, we're gonna put just a few words or phrases on it until he starts learning and we can teach him. And it was like 3 days later, they're like, well, he has every single phrase and word on there because he just knows it like that. And so much so that the creator of the app and stuff actually came to the school and was just blown away because he hadn't actually seen a child that was visually impaired using the device. And that's how, so we borrowed it from the school. Yeah. And then they said, good luck trying to get insurance to buy you one. And it just happened to be that it was on loan. And then we asked for it again and asked for it again. And that's when schools all got shut down here. So he came home with it. So
kind of lucked into that. And so, yeah, a couple
like
of things.
Keston's comment. Yeah, IEPs, they're no fun. And especially if you're in a school district that just, I've went to the State Department of Special Ed a few times on our school district and fought, and I've won several things against them. So we had the superintendent or whoever that was running at the time, he did not like me. And they started to,
He didn't like me either.
Yeah, that's the thing that we hear from a lot of our recipients is no one will fight for their children. No one will fight for them. So, you know, you got to take the fight to them and you have to be your own advocates. And, you know, a lot of times there isn't a community out there where there's shared resources and you are kind of learning on the fly and you've got to really be your own advocate. And then also, you know, when there's not a lot of information, there's not a lot of support, insurance isn't going to kick in for things like this. And thank God there's, you know, a few thousand committed donors that want to swoop in and close that gap. So can you kind of talk about, we kind of already went into you initially filling out that application for Chive Charities. You had already been kind of following the Chive and Chive Charities for a couple of years prior to 2015. The first story that kind of brought you in was actually Heston and Chrissy and Griffin. And then fast forward, you started your application, you kind of didn't finish it. And then, you know, all of a sudden this Accent 1000 with Lent Words for Life, it's like, okay, now I finally have something, a reason to finish this.
Yeah.
So you contact us, and how did that kind of all go down?
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened. It was about 2014 that, yeah, I was just searching the internet for more kids. We have a pretty huge online group for children born without eyes or with small eyes. And I knew sometimes we get together, the ones from Michigan, and we camp, some of us. And I was just looking for more kids in the area. And that's when I think, like, it was about 2014 that I stumbled across their story. And it's probably one of those that John Chive Charities ending stories to recap the year with the cheesy music that just gut wrenches you. And it's like, I was like watching their story, like bawling. And I would watch it like every day bawling. Like that first video is like, oh my goodness. And so
I know which one you're talking about because Chrissy starts to cry and I start to cry every time.
Yes.
At that point. Like that's, and she's probably.
I can't take them videos, but I watch them because they just like I would watch them every week because they just gave me so much like love. And my husband and I, we're part of like 100 different organizations. We volunteer across the board, but all these organizations seem to focus on a charity, or that, you know, they all raise money for American Cancer Society. You don't know where your money's going, you know, this and that. So we've been doing that for years. And then I'm like, wow, what an amazing campaign to actually put a person up front and then work your charity around that. I'm like, oh, that's like amazing. And so we had entered this, so I liked like the Michigan pages and stuff, but they're not really active on the pages, you know, the Facebook pages. So I was like, okay, I liked them, followed the story, whatever. And then in 2015, I entered Wesley into the Great Bike Giveaway to win an adaptive bike back then. And it was a voting competition. And one of my friends, who was maybe like even an admin for one of the downriver chapters in Michigan, says, well, have you brought it to the Michigan Chivers? I'm like, nothing happens on that page. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, no, like the group, the private group. I'm like, I'm not a part of that. I didn't know anything about these private groups. So he had invited me into the group, and I always say like, oh, it's all Gil's fault for bringing me into the group, because now I'm like nonstop been involved with the Chive since then. But so we ended up at that point, we didn't win for voting. I really couldn't get people that involved. I mean, it was a huge, huge deal. The kid that beat him and Wesley had more votes than they had ever received ever. But he didn't win it. And then my friend wanted to still get us a bike. So she started a little foundation, and I'm not a like receiver. I didn't want people to be paying for us to have a bike. We have a pretty good life, and we'll eventually get there. So all my friends and all these people wanted to donate. And I said, well, okay, I'll accept a bike if we can raise money for 2 other kids with the same situation as Wesley to get a bike first. Yeah, I know. That's what our friends said. They're like, what? You won't take a bike unless we can raise enough for 2 other bikes? I'm like, yep, that's how I want to do it. So they all raised enough money so that 2 people with similar conditions to Wesley around the US got their bikes first, and then we accepted the bike after them. What it comes down to sometimes when you have a kid that has adaptive equipment, you think you want something and it doesn't actually work out for you. So we got the bike. My husband got deployed. My husband came back. He had a ton of surgeries. He couldn't ride the bike with him. It was like a long story. And then that's when, well, I should rewind. Right before the people bought the bike and donated, that's when I started my application. And I kind of got like denied on my application. That I don't know if it was, I forget what it was. They didn't want to pay for a bike, or like, oh, that's just we kind of do bigger things than just a bike. And they asked if I had medical things that they could help with and stuff. And I was like, not really. Like, no, I don't. I think we're set. Like, unless you guys want to come and build me a pool or a hot tub. So I just left it at that and left it open. And then the friends ended up like paying to get all the bikes. And then from that point on, I was completely involved with like everything Chive. And then it just happened to be, we came up to this year. So Wesley and I like to do 5Ks, but he was starting to grow and we couldn't get a stroller that he could fit into. We always had this like little mantra that he'll start on his feet and he'll end on his feet, but he can't go through a whole 5K on his feet. So we've been looking for the last 5 years for a bigger stroller. Also, our older son took him through a triathlon, a kid's triathlon, and tried pulling him on a bike and swimming him and tried pushing him in this old stroller. It didn't work. So we never could afford that. And then it came up to this year that the one that we had kind of been looking at was one of the ones they were giving away in the Great Bike Giveaway again. And I kept saying, no, I can't ask for help again on another bike. That's just not my style. And our friends are like, nope, you're going to do it. And we're going to vote, and the chive's going to be behind you voting. And because of how many.
It came down to raising money again, right? So.
Yes. Well, because the last time Wesley was in it, they like blew the voting competition out of the park. I guess they had changed the rules since the last time we were in it, and you could only vote like one time. That's it. So I mean, I'm members of, the Michigan Chive, the Indiana Chive, the Chicago Chive, Military Chive, Chive Nation.
Did they knock it out of the park for you?
So they all voted their one time, and we still weren't winning. So that's when people are like, nah, never mind. We're just all going to start donating again. And it just took a couple days, and everyone had paid for it.
You got the bike.
But the only thing was we only could, they were giving away a small, and we needed like $900 to upgrade it to a medium. And it just so happened that the Michigan Chive had made these shirts a few years back, and they raised about $900 off these shirts that was sitting in a fund waiting to be used. And that was exactly like the amount we needed to upgrade his bike to, it's a bike stroller, like one of those pull behind things.
Yeah.
And that's when we got it. So at the same time, that's when we were trying to get this talking device, and it's just kind of all like been crazy. And that's when I was like, maybe I will complete my application. Who knows? I mean, I give every time I can. I can't always give a lot, but the flash campaigns get me, the local people, get me. I'm always into something. And the military Chive, I'm always donating to some after hours thing.
Yeah, and whatever goes around comes around. I'm glad that you ended up filling that out, because just like Heston and Chrissy and Griffin, I think that Wesley and you and Matt have inspired the next generation. Maybe that, there's a couple of people out there that were not going to fill out an application that are going to fill it out now. And, maybe they're inspired by Wesley, and maybe there's a mom out there that's just struggling that needed to read that story. And I think that, Wesley was welcome with open arms. Cool thing I would love is if, I don't know if Wesley can kind of use his machine to say anything.
Yeah, we're going to try.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
I'll hold it up so you can see it. I don't know if I can get it to, we got it in a nice green. It's an iPad. If I can get it close. But everything, it kind of has an icon. So for food, if he wants food, he has to go to the icon for food. Then it'll bring up breakfast, and then it'll bring up, meals. So it's not like a one touch and done. He has to go through all the screens.
So what you're saying is probably more complicated than I could figure out.
Yeah, it's kind of would be just like getting into your own iPad or cell phone. It's never just one button. So yeah, you just keep opening it, and can I use it, or are you going to show them, Wesley? He knows it way better than me, so.
Well, I hear him laughing over there, so.
But yeah, and that it has a keyboard on it, so he's actually just learning the QWERTY keyboard and trying to be able to spell things that aren't words on there. And I don't know if you can see.
Yeah.
It has this is since an iPad would just be flat and he would be pushing until something happens.
Yeah.
This actually has this plastic guard on it, so that each hole is a hole or a place to use. So
that's so cool.
So here, can you sit up and we can use it for them so they can hear you? Can you write?
Okay, if you're a little shy.
What do you want? Is there something you want that you can say? Or where you want to go? I know you don't like using it on demand.
I get it. Oh,
Can
well,
you say that?
I make, I need to go to the eye doctors. I
oh,
need to go to the eye doctors.
oh.
So he's been working on the keyboard. Remember how that one time we got the keyboard? What does mom's shirt say? What shirt is mom wearing? What does that say? Can you do that? Can you do that on there on the keyboard? No. Can you please? Yes. Okay. See if we can spell.
K,
Mm-hmm.
E, E,
Yep.
P,
Space. It's at the bottom. Remember the space? C.
C, E,
This is backspace. A. A's over here.
A, L,
It's below the K.
M. Ampersand.
C.
C,
We should have went with KCCO. We'd be done by now.
H,
I. I-V-E.
I,
That's just so cool to see in action.
Mm-hmm.
R,
Oh, backspace. Oh, V.
V,
Now E.
E,
Space. This is the space. Oh. You know how to spell on. You know how to spell your words.
O,
Shorthand for after Wesley.
N. Keep calm and chive on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you, Wesley. Well, Matt and Janet, is there anything that you guys wanted to just say to everybody that's, here on the call? And, we're going to probably release this later for viewing for anybody that missed out. But anything you want to say to just the Chivers, Michigan Chive, Indiana Chive, like everybody that's kind of been in your corner and continues to be there fighting with you.
G. Keep calm and chive.
Thank you. Like, I don't even know that thank you, like, covers it. It's just crazy. I mean, this group is crazy. Crazy in every kind of way. It's crazy. And it's crazy to know that, yeah, people, I mean, we have family and friends that have supported us little by little, but not like just complete strangers that have now become family.
Yeah. Matt, any final words?
It's hard because we're, for us, we're not used to being on this side. We're used to being on the other side. So it's hard for me to come up with any words. And that's, if you knew me, that's unusual because I can talk anybody's ear off. But it's a very overwhelming feeling that what the Chive did for Wesley and for the family. Although that at 2:00 in the morning, I want to throw that thing out the window because he's usually up and trying to say stuff, but it is really a godsend that we have that. So hopefully he can progress a lot more with that. So to help him with his daily, living going forward.
Great. Heston, Chrissy, want to thank you guys for coming on. Matt, Wesley, Janet, thank you guys for coming on. Like we always do, we want to leave with kind of a cheers to all the donors, to our inspiring recipients. I see Preston on. I'm sorry I didn't see you before.
Oh, wow.
You're a big part of Heston and Chrissy's launch.
Wow.
But yeah, everybody that has been on here, Frank, I think you've been on every single one of these. I tried. Brian, the Hollubs, really everybody. Gen Z, thank you guys. Thanks to the Chive Charities team, and cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Oh,
Cheers.
bye, Wesley. Talk to you guys in the next one.
Bye.
I'm telling them.
Aw.